KFUG Community Radio. Hey, good morning. It is 10:31. Paul Critz with you, Community Service, the show. And we are joined live in the studio this morning. Rob DeRego, proprietor of Sticky Grove. How you doing, Rob?
Hey, pretty well. Thanks for having me. Is that better there?
That's much better, yeah.
Hey, good morning.
So I just wanted to personally thank you on behalf of Delaware County for the for paying the DeRego tax into the general fund. We really appreciate that. I can't imagine what this county would be without the 60 grand or so that comes from Sticky Grove.
Near
really like
single-handedly funding the golf simulator.
Yeah. But that's what Delaware County would be. It would be a county without a golf simulator.
Exactly.
Where would we be then?
We can afford a couple of them now.
Yeah, exactly. So how you doing today, Rob? How's the holidays unfolding for you? How's business? All the stuff. How are you?
I'm doing good. I've been enjoying life and having fun, and
You staying busy out there?
Yes. Sales have been growing in the winter, so I think I was not much of a competitive person, but it's been it hasn't been disappointing through the winter here.
Well, that's good because you were the first with the Patients United just right up the road here. I remember that. I remember that fondly. That was nice, and I was just so hopeful. And then you moved all the way across town, and now we've got 2 other dispensaries in town now. How is that? What's that done to your business just here, going from being the only to being one of 3?
Well, it's highly competitive. There is definitely room for more than one dispensary, to begin with. But that's fine. That's what that's I think what we should accept in business is that competition works out the better deal and serves the public better. At least that's the ideal that most of us have most gravitated towards in America.
Now you were talking about, I don't know how much, if you want to get into this before we went live on the mics, you were talking about just how you got into all of this, where you were working at ShopSmart and stuff. I mean, you want to recount that again? How did you end up owning the first dispensary here in Delaware County?
I started, we had a little laundry room addition in our carport, and I just never made a whole lot of money, and I started thinking, is this an avenue? I think about 12 years ago, I went to a board meeting where we were banned, or we eliminated our count of plants. You could have 100 plants before that period if you had a doctor's note, was our understanding in the county. And it did inspire a bit of an industry, and I think kind of there's a realtor lobby, and they didn't like it, because it was destroying their houses. People rented houses to make a little business and whatnot.
Right.
And so that's how I started. I was working at ShopSmart, wasn't making enough. At the time, the company had decided to start doing some reforms with labor and whatnot, and we're closing some shops and cutting people's hours, and I wasn't supposed to look at it as an income source because we weren't supposed to do it for profit, and so the wheels started turning, and Delaware Patients Together was eventually formed as a not-for-profit, and I always fought how I'm supposed to be doing that kind of thing, you're not supposed to be doing it for profit. So I tried to offer services to the least among us, that were oftentimes paid for by people who could afford it, in different ways, And it was hard to get a space, nobody wanted to talk about it, to talk about it was kind of a dirty subject, and so I made an icebreaker and went around to everybody that had an empty building and tried to make myself look professional. And Larry owned Park City Superette and agreed to rent me the little burger stand there. That was the start.
I think Gordy Bros stuck there until they moved, and then your business stuck there. It's really the only businesses that have stuck there for a while. Actually, I always thought that location was kind of cursed.
It's an organic location. It was a lot of fun. We found a lot of old soda cans underneath of it, and we replaced the subfloors and sided one side of it, and it was actually a lot of fun. It was not a really expensive rent, and I never felt supported by the local government, but it was highly supported by the public.
Yeah, and that seems to be the case for you from the get-go. I mean, you're talking about the Patients United, but and I'm remembering when I think the first dispensary, medical marijuana dispensary, was just right across the street, right here, right? There was a place here on the
we've had at one point we had 7 dispensaries in our county. We had 2 in Smith River.
Wow.
And we had. At one point we had 2 on the street.
Okay.
Yeah, there's
Right, and there was up with the fencing and the compound that's up that way.
I
That's
helped
right.
open one called City Collector that's across the flea. It was at the flea market from where we were at. Mm-hmm. Gosh, where were the other ones? There were 7 though. I remember.
Wow.
You know, and a lot of people popping up. You know, unregulated. And, you know, trying to serve the need that kind of aroused out of the 1996. You know.
Right.
The 7 hidden wonders of Del Norte County.
Yeah. The back in the medical marijuana era. That's interesting. I had no idea there were that many at that point.
Yeah, I think it was Randy was across the street, and he quit the day that they kind of looked like maybe they were gonna like finally make an ordinance.
Really?
And maybe he was wise.
Yeah, maybe that's
That was one of the things I wanted to ask Rob, because you were part of all of that, creating the ordinance and the taxing structure for the county, weren't you? Were you part of that task force?
They were just going to ban us, and so a number of people, as sometimes happens in our county, showed up to support something. You know, for some reason they got scared the county was going to act against the interest of the public, and a number of people really showed up, you know, expecting them to ban cannabis, and it became a long, drawn-out process. You know, that was. You know, certainly wasn't any certainty. You know, we're a board made of 3 cannabis advocates and 3 very, very, you know, the largest landowners in our county, other than Green Diamond, and then some members of the government were put on the board to help advise us. You know, the county council, the sheriff was, the city community development director joined the board. And we did our best. You know, it was a census kind of situation where, you know, for me, I didn't want to go out of business, and I also wanted to, you know, take heart to what my role was as a public member, you know, on an appointed board. You know, the ordinance we advised, actually, there was, you know, Patty's dispensary on Northcrest would have allowed Patty's dispensary as well.
Right.
But the board, you know, and I'd held it up on that board until the ordinance was made that would, you know, that would basically give her enough room between the school there at Pine Grove. Mm-hmm. But the board, you know, that was the only thing they adjusted in the ordinance.
Was the space between?
Was Patty's space. You know?
What was? I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, please.
So what I look back fondly on that whole like public debate, and how it was an issue that was in front of the public's eyes for so long because of this working group, the ad hoc working group that you were a part of, and Jesse Davis was on there, and all these other people that you. It seemed like that was almost to me like that's the way things like this should work. Is that your takeaway? I mean, that kind of building that consensus. I applauded the local government for putting that together and getting public input and folding it all together.
Sure, there were, I mean, yeah, to some degree. You know, I mean, I think the board, it was clear what the public wanted. So I think that was, you know, I think to me a problem is the board's embarrassed to represent their community. You know, and so to me the cannabis group was a way, you know, they wanted to ban it, and it was a way for them to take responsibility off of themselves for their obligation.
Oh, wow.
You know, we were it was 2/3 of us voted for this in Del Norte County almost, you know, in Prop 64. And we all understand we want a greater GDP here. A healthy GDP makes a tax base, a healthy tax base that can support
services. And yeah, exactly, yeah.
And so we ended up with an ordinance that just suited me, you know, and I guess, and it's not because I paid them or was friends with them, it's because I cussed them, you know?
Yeah.
And
how did the ordinance just serve you?
Well, I was the only one that got licensed.
Well,
you know?
Sure, but I mean,
the only pot business in town, you know, and really what we needed was, you know, 10% of our GDP is about $30 million. That would have been nothing to put up in pot farms, but we would have had to be an inviting atmosphere for that, you know. We would have had to, they would have had to acknowledge that we need to export stuff to the 5th largest economy in the world, California. You know, that's what we're missing here, is trying to import visitors seasonally. It's not sustainable. We had a small opportunity there, you know, so I do hold it critical, you know, that they could have done that job themselves, you know. And furthermore, half the board was the people who pleaded, like me and other cannabis advocates, to be on there. I think they would have looked dumb not putting us on there. And the other half of the board had nothing to do with other than owning most of the capital in the county, you know, as far as input on a cannabis ordinance. The people that, if you needed a public group, you know, somebody who represented the children might have been nice, you know, you know.
As opposed to, breaking down the representation.
Who owns the land and who wants pot? To me, it was kind of a generic take on public will, but And they do that a lot, I mean, I got a take on Chris Howard this week, and I'm supposed to be, I guess, thank Chris Howard, but, it's election season, and I don't expect them to frickin' just act practical or half practical or 40% practical 3 months out of every 2 to 4 years,
Yeah, good point, yeah.
And I've seen that with politicians in general locally. They will come to you at election season. They will work with you, but and they'll spend the money the rest of the year and not want anything to do with you.
What are you hoping to accomplish with Chris Howard? What's happening with that?
Well, I want all 5 of them just to dedicate the funds. Okay. That's really what the public wanted. That we didn't want to tax.
Okay, let's back up before we get into that, because I really want to talk about. Let's talk about just the taxing structure as it exists now for you, and where we were, say, at the beginning or at last week's Board of Supervisors meeting. They were looking to adjust. You pay 6% to the county right now, right?
Yes, the county can choose between 2 and 6, and they do so annually.
How much of say I go buy whatever the peanut butter stuff was, and I go get that, and it's like $20. How much of that money goes to taxes, state, local?
$1.20.
Okay.
$1.20 to the county, and then about another $1.50 in additional state. So they're also ignoring. There's 8% in sales tax. They get 2 of that, so they get $20,000 no matter what from the shop.
Okay. Yeah.
Even if the tax was totally eliminated, they would still get $20,000 in sales tax.
So that's better than a 10% markup, or 10% margin to cover the taxes on those prices that you pay, or that I would pay, right?
Yeah, it's I'm sorry now.
But I'm trying to figure out the percentage of a total, like the sticker price. What percentage of that goes to the taxes? The tax.
Well, 6%. So yeah, a $10 purchase would be 60 cents goes to the pot tax. About another 70 cents will show up on there in California state taxes.
Okay.
There's other taxes buried in there. I pay about 28% excise on the wholesale price.
Right.
So if I get a $1,000 order, it's about $1,300. With the excise tax.
Okay. So you're paying taxes on the wholesale side as well when you get product.
So the excise tax is a line on my invoices.
Wow. Okay. Oh my God.
So one of the things that just sort of struck me, because I didn't understand the taxing structure until I was watching that meeting, and so they have an option. They can go 2% to 6%. But they're choosing to do the max when they actually have some leeway, and then juxtaposing that against Crescent City, which is charging no tax.
Yeah. And it doesn't, I do take it as a retaliatory thing they do with me. I'm very critical of the board, and I always have been for 12 years. In the beginning they sent plainclothes, or the sheriff did, when I spoke at one of these meetings, to my home, and I lived a very poor person's life. We're both working 2 people's jobs.
What'd they do?
Because I spoke in public.
Uh-huh.
Well, Hemmingson was the only member that was on the board at the time. It was Finnegan. I think McNamer was a good member at the time, but she didn't, she didn't win the next election. But yeah, I spoke at a meeting saying, hey, the 100 plants is making a few bucks for some people, and we're all very poor. I hadn't even begun growing, cannabis, but I did build a small shed in my backyard, and 2 officers, Rivera and Tenias, with the Del Norte Sheriff's Department, came to my house one morning after I'd taken my son to school. And my heart started thumping as I looked out the window and see these 2 plainclothes officers with badges around their necks, and they pulled up in a plain SUV. And I said, oh, I built the shed. Maybe it's 10 feet off too much.
Right. There's a permit, right?
Yeah. A permit or whatever. And no, they said the shed looked commonplace to the type to procreate marijuana, and just said, hey, could I, wonder, maybe they'd let us take a look around. It was a drop and knock. And I immediately had a panic attack.
But
I did show them around, and that was when the discussion started. And they said, well, what do you want with your tax dollars? And I said, well, I have, I said, I don't want you looking for my cannabis in a little 100 square foot shed.
Yeah.
And it's been like that. Our chief of police was on the county sheriff. He was with the sheriff's department, and he lived kitty corner for me at the time.
Who was it? Black?
Griffin.
Griffin. Okay.
And he was on the task force at the time. And I'd be working at ShopSmart. One time I had accused a guy of shoplifting. I used to catch a lot of shoplifters, and this guy did not shoplift. And I felt bad. A few days later, I saw him out there when I was on my day off, and I said, I'm going to buy you a beer. I feel sorry. And I went in and got him a beer. And by the time I got out, Chief Griffin was around the corner harassing dealing with whatever problem he was dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
And this guy is the guy I'm buying the beer for is about 10 feet from him. And I go to give him the beer, and Chief Griffin looks at me like he's going to kill me. And within moments, we're inches away from each other. You know, not me. I've never been in a fist fight. You know, he's moving towards me. And he's inches away from me in my face. And I'm saying, well, I said it just like I said it to you. I accused this guy of shoplifting. And I thought I'd give him a beer. Is there a problem with that? And he said, I didn't know ShopSmart buys beer for homeless people. And I said, no, I'd accused him of shoplifting. I didn't know ShopSmart buys beers for shoplifters. You know, like he's going to rat me out to my superiors. I'm the shift leader there at night, you know. Uh-huh. I said, no, my wife works at Ray's and I work here. You know, like just being real common sense, you know.
Right.
You know, and this is something I felt like you know, and he's telling me he knows the people who run the shop and all this kind of thing, and he knows my wife and he knows where we work, you know.
What the?
And you know, so I mean, you know, I'm used to this, you know.
The more I hear about Griffin,
I love
the
it
less
up there.
I
I'm not
trust.
leaving because of it. You know, I'm not going to leave.
It's also
they
funny.
They will see me every 2 weeks, you know, and I will be represented. But you know what I've noticed is missing? I noticed the government's corrupt. That's not the problem. Is the people don't show up.
Yeah.
As soon as I got to that meeting the other morning, I wanted to take a picture. There was no cars out there.
Wow.
Where is the public?
You know, it's also funny that you mentioned buying a beer for him, because I was just looking further into this article. The county also doesn't tag against alcohol establishments. Now, that's the county, if I'm understanding correctly.
It does or what? What say that
does
again?
not tax against alcohol establishments.
Yeah. Wow.
And that's also countywide, not just city.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Just further adding that on the whole tax dynamic.
Yeah, no, it's the DeRego tax, the DeRego fund. That's just. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Mike.
No. I mean, because I really I'm struck by what you're saying about where's the public, because that's one of the questions that I repeatedly ask myself, whether it's with this issue or whether it's with homelessness or whether it's with any number of other issues, that if there was more public input and public pressure, things might actually be better for the majority of the people who live in this community. But people don't show up. And I think there's a myriad of reasons for that. I wish I knew how to change it. But people don't show up. And then we have something like this where maybe if there might have been more people there might have been a little bit more pressure for them to have some more flexibility regarding this issue of the tax. And as I understand it, you're not even objecting to the tax.
No.
If they're going to take it, you want them to spend it on something that actually benefits the community.
I tend to be, kind of a lefty politically, so I'd always agreed with the idea that there was resources that needed to be provided, in a community. But I've also noticed that they don't. Our county supervisors have no interest in providing those services.
No.
Those services are provided by state, federal funding, and grants. And so, for me, I've wrote these guys about identity and work, and how identity is important, for the tip cup idea.
Mm-hmm,
I would like them to, at least when they donate to the Chamber of Commerce, acknowledge that tourism is the lowest paid industry in the United States, and maybe encourage tip cups at corporate sales tax, And so I wrote them with articles, and studies about how identity affects you and work,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm there too. I'm not just a drug dealer, and I'm not just a sandwich maker, I'm not just a retailer. I need to give something back to my community. And I am giving something back to my community, but it's a $30 an hour golf simulator as far as I can tell,
Yeah.
And I don't identify with it,
Uh-uh.
And, it's not if it's all about money for me, then maybe I could apply at the post office, for God's sakes.
Right,
there's
right.
20 grand in
And at least get health care out of the deal, right? Yeah.
Oh, and it's a $30 an hour golf simulator that's been sitting
For more than
dormant
a year.
for over a year.
Dormant, we assume.
We assume. Yeah.
Even if you did align with it, where's the
it's
results?
been?
That
Who
was
knows
the
who's
one.
been using it, right?
And they bought that for the children, they say.
Yeah.
For the children,
Yeah.
because children
Big golf kids
children
here.
love golf.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
We love it.
It's a small amount of money, but our general fund has grown from about 25 million to 35 million over just maybe 7 years or so. You know, so at a certain point, you want to say, where's the $10 million annually? You know, and how that can affect us. You know, if you add up our budgets between, you know, and I don't want to include the school district and other governments, but the school district and just the county, you're at $250 million in funding for these two governments. You know, which amounts to you know, about almost $15,000 an individual besides the ones imprisoned. You know?
My God, wow.
What do we, you know, I look at Operation North Pole, they serve 1,000, you know, they say, disadvantaged youth each year, you know. And I just think there's a way to start to work towards the bottom. You know, this trickle down thing is not going to work, you know. But
I often fantasize about having the ability to go, okay, I'm going to pay taxes. I'm paying taxes. I want to tell the federal government I would like my taxes to go to something other than the next super carrier, right? Let's spend it on people and not on death. And I regret that I don't have that ability. But you, in this instance, you're the only person paying this tax.
So that's the general fund is our ability to control a little bit of what we do with our money, you know, locally.
Because it seems to me the general fund is just basically, it's like where they put money where they don't want people, you know, talking about where it's going to go. Oh, it's like petty cash. I mean, it's not petty cash, but it's the general fund, and we'll spend it this way at our discretion. It's discretionary funding that way, right? I mean,
without any progress report of how, you know, this is impacting us in 5 years, or how this is growth over 3 years ago for this department's you know, spending. It's just budgeted.
Yeah.
Unless it's youth housing. You know, well, that's federal and state, and it's only $6,000. That's just $60,000. You know, that will house 3 people for a year. You know, at current market rates. You know what I mean? There's something that we can, you know, we can take advantage of some transparency and actually see something happen. You know?
Well, and as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong, that when the ordinance was being created, the issue of the tax was part of that, and you may have at that time argued that it be a dedicated tax to some kind of social good or another, and that you were counseled by the legal county council to not do that, because doing that would take a 2/3 vote of the people.
Sure.
And so the easy way forward was to just say, well, it's just going to go into the general fund. I mean, am I right about that?
Yeah. I mean, well, first of all, you know, there was no interest in a tax, really, I don't believe, by the cannabis group, you know, but when it came down to it, you know, we talked about how maybe a lack of a tax would encourage industry to come here and put some roots in, you know.
Like Crescent City is doing.
Yeah. And, but Joel, you know, advised us that the board would be more like, we didn't know if the board would enact what we advised, you know. There was no indication, you know. I mean, if they weren't going to enact what was obvious, you know.
So were you afraid of asking for too much initially, or were you cautioned against asking too much?
Well, it was consensus. So sometimes it would come down to, like, how many weeks are you going to keep meeting, you know. I mean, not everybody on that board wanted to be there. Right. You know, as much as I was willing to. And so, you know, there was just a lot of compromises, you know. And there was, I think, somebody with first 5 that would show up, you know, and I think that person was interested in saying, hey, these funds, you know. I mean, I think that was their main interest was, hey, yeah, there'll be a tax, and where are we going to use these funds? But yeah, the public didn't involve themselves quite as much as they should have, you know. You know, we could have either went without a tax, or we could have found something noble to do with it, you know. But instead, we placated to politicians, you know, that we don't supervise, you know, between every 2 to 4 years. You know,
good point.
5 supervisors, you know, wanted a tax for no reason, you know. No reason at all.
Just to throw the money on the pile without it having any sort of purpose.
Yeah, and this is, I mean, I want to be really clear. These are my words. I'm not trying to put them in your mouth or anybody else's. But in essence, I mean, it sounds like the task force was counseled, well, if you pay them, and I don't mean it's going directly into their pockets, I want to say that. If you basically pay the county a bribe of the 6% tax, they might actually do this, as compared to if you just ask for it without putting some money on the table, your chances are much more likely of getting shot down.
Sure, yeah.
And Mike, you might not be saying it, but I'll pause it. I imagine general funds is embroidered on the pocket.
Well, I just want to be clear that, I mean, I'm not accusing any supervisor of like this money comes in and they're going, okay, here's your 10 grand, here's your 10 grand.
But also I think it's a characterization you're making about it being like a bribe in quotes, in that it's not a bribe. He's talking about it was a compromising sort of situation. They were compromising, and so every side now go, what's in it for the county? Oh, well, how about 6%? Or, something like that. It doesn't necessarily have to be a bribe. It could be a function of, with the right attitude, any sort of compromise looks like coercion. So
right. No, and you're right. You're saying it better than I said it.
But I know you're angry about the.
So do wonder, outside of like golf simulators, what does the general fund actually? Do you have any idea?
Law enforcement's growing in cost. So basically it's roads, fire, and law enforcement. Not a whole lot else really. But it's but the section of that pie that's going to law enforcement is growing. Our sheriff left, it was $30,000 in unfunded pension debt on top of what we budgeted.
Wow.
The last year he was with us. Which is about 50% more just in unfunded pension debt than the average person working in the tourist industry locally.
Right.
Because it's politically popular, because it feels right to them, but with no math or anything, it's all the consent agenda from what I've observed in the years.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and with every school resource officer who's a cop that they add, that's another amount of money that county is going to have to pay at some point. We may be grant funded now, but at some point it won't be grant funded, and by that time it will be
just
part
3
of
years.
the budget. Yeah,
and that cost $1 million a decade to retire them, let alone while they're working. And who's getting them? The city. It's a different government, but it's mirrored in a similar way. You could look on the agenda. There'll be a meeting tonight, but it's symbolic when you look at the payroll report, and it's similar to what we see in the county, where the city employee association gets a $75 contribution towards their association every 2 weeks, but the city police department employee association, which you would think would be lumped into just the city employee association, gets a $500 contribution, for 12 to represent 12 officers.
Wow.
And that plays out, right down the line with your grants as well. So we could have applied for other grants besides the $8 million that the city wants to redo their 4,000 square foot police station. But that was the shovel-ready project. Why was that the shovel-ready project? Why wasn't there another project that maybe made better sense of that $8 million? Well, because the chief of police takes up about half of the frickin' agenda there, and putting on everything with the city council, Wow. And, so even the grants we could harness towards more, meaningful avenues, But the general fund, is something that we should take control of. I wish we would, and it's how many guns are you going to buy? How many bullets?
Right.
By the way, bullets for the sheriff's department, they spend 3 times as much on bullets as they did 10 years ago for practice and whatnot. If you could look at their budgets, because that's their main thing they train on is shooting responses. Yeah, how often do we have a chance to shoot someone locally? Not too often, really. But we have a lot of chances to, I guess, get people off of nicotine that are young. We have a lot of chances to help people, see a future that didn't see a future for themselves that are young. We have a lot of chances to not have to arm ourselves so well.
Right. And it's just, it's getting that, why do we have to argue? Why do these sorts of, tobacco-free Del Norte, for instance, things like this that work in conjunction as part of like public health, why do they have to scramble for grant funding when the general fund's buying 3 times more, as many bullets for law enforcement as it did 10 years ago? What would you, if you this coming year are looking at about $60,000 in tax revenue just based on that 6% tax going to the county, what would you, in your heart of hearts, like to see that money spent on?
Well, I thought about it, and I really don't know much. So, I think Heather Snow, might know, the best bang for $60,000 for youth. And I think she would be a good advocate there. I bet you she knows every
But
program
specifically
that's,
for youth, that's the thing that you'd like. That's what you'd like to see funded. Something for young people.
Yeah, I think I explained it there. Public comment. I
Again, but let's repeat it on the air, because as you said, there's nobody
rungs,
there
you
at
don't
public
have these
comment.
rungs on the ladder. The top rungs are done, and you can see that happening. There's cops up and down Lunder Stump building themselves new 2-story garage playhouses to put their boats in.
Good point.
And we can see them up there, but we don't really see an avenue, up there, except for there seems to be so much fraud that they'll probably have turnover and need another one in a couple of years. So, you know what I mean? It's
just like we work through sheriffs like that. Yeah.
the CHP just shot somebody, and we can say whether it's justified or not. I wouldn't have shot him, a guy with a knife. I've been at Shop Smart in similar situations.
Right. That's
There are also situations where a chief of police says there's a lot of restraint not shooting someone. I guess it's because all the bullets.
Yeah, Gabe in the park, who was like freaking out in the park, and the kids are playing soccer, and so some off-duty CHP officer pulled his gun on him, and they ended up. He's still in jail. He's still in the jail 2 months later
for terrorizing
and cursing in the presence of children in the park or something like that. And the chief of police says, "Oh, the off-duty CHP officer showed restraint, admirable
when he
restraint,
only held him at gunpoint
by not shooting him."
Right, and we constantly, we did a law enforcement declaration about a year ago, and at the time, I think the county should have known that people were investigating what was happening, and they should know what's happening in their sheriff's department. They're called supervisors. I used to work in fast food.
Right.
I used to work in fast food, and we took the idea of supervisor pretty fucking seriously compared to our board of supervisors. You know what I mean?
That's such a stoner.
We were into labor costs. We were into food costs. We were,
That's such a stoner insight. Just sitting around getting stoned and going, "Hey, they're called supervisors, man."
Usually you get chewed out once in a while as the members,
But also true, the amount of supervisors that'll answer, "I don't know." You should.
Yeah, you should. That's your job.
And
right.
what the individual supervisors knew or didn't know, going back to something that you just said, Rob, county council knew that the Sacramento Bee was issuing freedom of information requests regarding records for the Del Norte County Sheriff, and that information plus others led to this report that they did. And I would find it difficult to believe that the county council was just going, "Oh, we're going to do this, and we're not going to tell our supervisors."
Yeah, I know. Yeah. Right. This will be fun.
Yeah.
I want to break in here. It's 2 minutes past 11. You're tuned to KFUGLP Crescent City 101.1 FM online, kfugradio.org. We have local business owner Robert DeRego in talking with us about all things cannabis and county and funding and the tax that he pays the county and contributes. You contribute more to this county than I ever did as a business person. So right on. Thank you for your service.
and let me just take the opportunity to say that Rob and Sticky Grove are under
yes, we should
of
be.
KFUG.
Yes,
and we appreciate that.
Yes.
Oh, yeah.
And we forget the Rob's a poet laureate. He
That's
sang that whole thing
Yeah,
for
poet
us.
laureate of Del Norte County. Yeah. So two things, Rob. One is that we have this tax. It's only getting applied to people who are in the county. The city is not doing it. So that certainly it lowers the ability to create jobs of this type in the county, because why would people locate their business in the county's jurisdiction when they could do it in the city and immediately be off the hook for $60,000 a year?
Sure.
Right. So there's that. And then, now, are you actively engaged in trying to create a movement of some type to get something done with this tax money that's being... is it more than just you hoping something would be done differently, or are you actively trying to engage people?
My flyer will have all their emails. I've been putting on the flyer for different. I think the public needs to be involved, so I call the board of supervisor meetings. Wake Bacon participates, and the city council 520, and I put them on the flyer every week. And so this week the flyer will have all their emails, and just advocating for the community to write the board of supervisors to dedicate the fund to something that worthy, I'm not, it's election season. You could repeal the tax. I could go get 800 signatures and get it on a ballot, This seems a little self-interested for like a petition, so I'm not going to do that.
But that's just the flip side of the coin, right? You're talking about, if you went out and championed, repealing the tax, it's only going to apply to you. But the other side of the coin is the tax, as it stands now, only applies to you. So it's like, I don't know. I wouldn't hold it against you, I guess, is what I'm saying. If you go, hey, look,
if I tried to repeal it.
If hey, I'm the one. I guess
I think they should repeal it. I think that we as the public.
So you're expecting them to actually think things through and do things the right way?
I think if I'm willing to pay it, I think they should find something worthy to do with it. I think that they have power, and they could. I don't think everything we have to do. I think we should run some voter initiatives. To hold our board accountable. Our Stimson fund's about gone. They bought a DA a car with it last year. That was supposed to be an economic development fund. It's been around for decades. Wow. So we might want to do something where we tell them to protect it and rebuild it. There might be a grand idea. Maybe we get a sawmill here one day or something.
Right. Instead of like a hockey simulator.
Yeah, I wanted to do the voter or the tip cup idea. Not where they enforce it, but where they encourage it. At places, because it really is. For poor people, it's an opportunity about 25% extra, usually under the table, unless the company gets involved with claiming the tips on their thing or whatever. And so I'd like to run that as a voter initiative. So I'm looking at things like that, or maybe when they give money to the Chamber of Commerce, that they'll acknowledge the downfall of the industry that they're calling on the people to work for, so they can get the occupancy tax, which is what they're investing in, really.
Yeah.
And things like that, things where where the board will have to acknowledge that the public wants a little more out of them, so that we have is watching, and that's what I'd like to work on. And I'm willing to pay the taxes if they will do something decent with it. If not, then it's election season, and I think it would be fun to go burn some weed and throw it in the harbor or something like that. I've got other things I want to try in life, so this could be kind of an excuse for me.
Maybe we can find some tri-corner hats.
Sorry, yes. So I know you
throw it solid in the harbor.
You've done it in the past. Do you have any plans to run for office in Delaware County?
No, but I'd like to hope that maybe other people might. I've always thought about trying to get people to find somebody that lives in a district that's coming up that seems to have any kind of common, is relatable to our plight in our county.
Yeah.
And I guess I haven't seen anybody pop. I think you said it once. If they want to do it, they probably not the person you want. Or whatever.
Exactly. No, that's what Plato said in the Republic. Yeah, the last person you want leading you is the person who wants to be the leader. Yeah.
Yeah. It looks like a hard job. I mean, even if you deserve to be chewed out, you can tell they really like what they do. They don't like being criticized. It's like the biggest thing they've ever done in their life. And
it's the biggest thing.
Well,
that's cute.
I know I've had discussions with other people in the past because the election margins here are so small that with not a tremendous amount of effort, people could find good candidates, run them, and win if they were willing to put the work into doing it, as compared to always bitching about how, well, these people never do what we want them to do. Well, okay, they're not going to. They're not going to do it. So what's the next thing? Put people in there who will do
it's
better on behalf of the county. And it's not that hard in a small community like this. It really isn't. The numbers are not that huge.
Well, this is Bob's district. In a couple of years, he comes up. So which one of you guys are going to run for Bob Berkowitz's seat?
I've thought about that, but I don't. I'd have to give this up.
Yeah.
I can run this district like a mad empress.
There you go.
Here?
Persephone does. Yes.
So you're taking Bob's spot in 2 years.
Yeah, I'll take it. We're gonna re-sexy it up.
We got one. We got
That's
one.
true. Yeah, no, that's it. Yeah.
I always thought we could reprogram him. When I ran against Roger,
reprogram Bob.
Yeah, it's the Terminator 2 thing. And I went to meet Roger, and I tried to meet with Catherine that year. When I ran against them. Before I ran against them, I went and tried to meet with them. And I met with Roger. Roger will meet with anybody, and. He told me I was probably high and shit most of the time I met with him. But, that's the whole idea, is that we, even if he's a bigot or whatever, maybe we could find, there's always some sort of virtue or some sort of benefit in your adversity or whatever.
Did you offer him any free bong hits to see if that would help with the reprogramming?
No.
See, I'm imagining you put mushrooms in his tea and tried to you'll be better. And he's just like, oh, I hate nature. And he spits it out.
Yeah, I just think we could. I think we would reprogram if we just were present, you know, and made them embarrassed to not represent them. Because right now they're embarrassed to represent us, you know, versus, you know, being embarrassed because they're not representing us because we're there looking at them in the eyes. You know, there's more than a few of us. You know?
Right.
But yeah, Roger, I couldn't get him high. But one of those meetings there, he had an accident. He had a neck thing.
Right.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
I was in the aisle and he just looks at me. I would shake his hand. I think I did put my hand out to shake, and he didn't shake my hand that time. But he looked at me and he said, "The Norco's working just fine," like as if I was gonna try and give him a joint or something.
Oh my God. Rob DeRego, what can you say to get people involved, watching these meetings, going to these meetings, sitting in on the government that's making all these decisions in their name?
Well, I think it's the second and fourth Tuesday of every month, you know, at 10 a.m., which is tough for probably some people to get to. But
Yeah,
it's
that
probably easy
should-
for a lot of us.
Almost
So
intentionally.
if you got
I
time,
know.
jump on Zoom or get on down there. Not for me in the tax, just to
be
start
involved.
observing, you know, and so we can start to manage our resources to affect our actual needs in our community. You know,
And
don't
you
leave it
do-
all on Heather Snow and federal and state grants.
When you brought this up earlier, even if you can't like go to the meetings or you're not prepared to participate, just look at the agenda and look how much cash is getting doled out in the consent calendar.
Yeah.
Without, you know, rarely any public discussion at all. It's a lot of money flying around.
And if you don't get involved, someday you might be a business owner in this county and be the only person paying a very specific tax.
I've learned after this amount of time, you need a business where there's a population and you live here, you know, and that's the natural incentive in our community. But yeah, if we could change that in some regard, that would be helpful.
How do you mean? What are you talking about changing?
You know, for us, it would be exports. You know, I mean, you know, my thing. You know, there's pot shops. You guys can go to Brookings or the city or whatever. You know, but there was a lot of opportunity to produce things here. You know, to make hash and grow weed. You know.
Yeah, and to kind of brand Del Norte with that. And
We have psychedelics coming up.
Oh, wow. That's right. Arcada's already
I know.
Right. Yeah, I've got an initiative made. You know, that we can start circulating for that. I just copy pasted Arcada's and.
Oh, seriously? For
Yeah.
decriminalizing? Wow, okay. All right.
And so, and I one thing I took out of theirs was I added in the day that California legalizes that the production of these ethnogenic plants will be permissible at any commercially zoned property, right? So that they can't hold up our industry for 20 years, you know, our chance at growing an industry in a new business for 20 years. But yeah, so that's coming up in November, you know, and whether you want to eat mushrooms or not, we don't have to sell them locally, but we might want to, you know, make an inviting environment for people that we're going to grow it to export to other communities for the needs that they'll be doing so for.
And that'll be the Carlos Castaneda tax.
Well, Rob, thanks for coming in today. Is there anything that we didn't talk about, we didn't get around to, that you'd like to say, that you'd like to make sure gets said?
No, I appreciate everybody. Thank you to the community so much for supporting me. You know, it's this community is one thing this community is great for, is like an incubator. You know, if you can live humbly and lean, you can try a lot of different things here. And
Interesting.
So,
That's true.
I
Yeah.
really have to thank the community for supporting me in that regard.
Yeah, right on. Anything else? Anybody? All right.
Thank you for being with us today.
Yeah.
Okay, appreciate you guys.
Rob DeRego from Sticky Grove, and join Rob at the next Board of Supervisors meeting, because he's the only guy sitting in the good section. We got other people over in the other section.
He's the only person truly rooting for the home team.
Right, exactly. And as a reminder, Sticky Grove, Robert DeRego, of course, underwriting KFUG. Case in point.
Sticky Grove in Crescent City reminds you to not pass the doochie during the pandemic. Just a friendly stoner tip from your local cannabis retailer and KFUG underwriter, Sticky Grove, 1070 101 on the north side of town. Call them at 460-6383 or place your order for pickup online at leafly.com. Just search Sticky Grove when you're there. For all your cannabis needs, it's Sticky Grove. Sticky Grove. Sticky Grove. Sticky Grove. There we go. In Crescent City. Hey, Rob, thanks for supporting KFUG.